Welcome back, and I'm back with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent this morning. And Mr. Secretary, one top Chinese trade official is headed to Washington this week, although we understand that the U.S. officials say this is not a formal negotiation. He's only meeting with deputy-level officials. What can we expect from the further deal clarity on a trade deal completion with China?
So, Maria, this official's visit, as you said, is more of a technical visit. It has nothing to do with the ongoing trade negotiations. My guess is that we will meet again. I'll meet again with my Chinese counterpart, the vice premier, at the end of October, beginning of November. We've been on a 120-day roll process as we negotiate with the Chinese. As I've said before, it's a very complicated relationship that we have. Our largest military rival is also the second largest economy in the world. It's also the largest U.S. deficit. So we are moving very deliberately on this. Both sides have approached it with great respect. And I think that each meeting, we met in Geneva, we met in London, we met in Stockholm. And I think each meeting, we are moving the ball forward toward a more permanent relationship.
Is there any effort on the horizon or in the talks expected about removing those Chinese companies that trade on our exchanges to pressure the Chinese to stop supporting our adversaries like Russia and to start being a good actor on the global stage, Mr. Secretary? That would be an economic lever you can pull.
Yeah, that hasn't been on the table yet. There have been other things. We have quite high tariffs on China. The Chinese are purchasing substantial amounts of Russian crude, but they also purchased substantial amounts before the Russian invasion. So everything's on the table, Maria. And the good thing here is President Trump has a very good relationship with Party Chair Xi. So when you have the leaders at the highest level in communication, it makes the job much easier.
Yeah, great point. Mr. Secretary, I want to ask you about the Fed, President Trump firing Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook over the alleged mortgage fraud. The president says he wants to move quickly on announcing her potential replacement, hinting that he's already have somebody in mind. But Cook is refusing to resign. She's already planning a lawsuit, and as you know, her lawyer is the lawyer of Hunter Biden, Abby Lowell. But we know that President Trump now has a path to reshape the FOMC after this firing as Fed governor. Where does this go next? Is this going to be held up in the courts, you think?
Well, a couple of things here, Maria. There are two kinds of people. There are people who think that President Trump is putting undue pressure on the Fed, and there are people like President Trump and myself who think that if a Fed official committed mortgage fraud, that this should be examined, and that they shouldn't be serving as one of the nation's leading financial regulators. And what we haven't heard from Ms. Cook is we haven't heard her say, "I didn't do it." We haven't heard her say, "I didn't do it." She just keeps saying the president can't remove her. The other thing, too, that I have called in the recent past for an internal review of all the Fed's operations, and I've encouraged Chair Powell to do this on an internal basis before there is an external review. And this is the kind of thing that needs to be addressed, because the Fed is an unaccountable institution, and its relationship with the American people depends on a high level of trust. And incidents like this puncture that trust. So President Trump is trying to make sure that anyone who serves at this institution has the trust of the American people.
And of course, this firing gives the president potentially a path to obtain a majority of support on the Federal Reserve. And is that the goal here? Are you expecting Mickey Bowman and Christopher Waller to go along with the agenda if, in fact, you are moving toward a majority of support within the Fed?
Well, again, Maria, all the Fed governors are independent. Is Governor Bowman, Governor Waller? We don't send them over a note and say vote this way.
Right.
These are distinguished individuals with long careers, and they may have a more open mind in terms of monetary policy, the economy. Governor Waller was out in the wilderness a couple of months ago when he was talking about the need to lower rates when the rest of the Fed board was pretty intractable. And when you say a majority, Maria, that's just on the board in D.C.
That's right.
There's also the regional governors who also vote. So, it's a complicated institution. Since 2008, the Fed has, I think, strayed from its core mission on monetary policy.
Yeah.
I've said many times that the straying from this core mission threatens the monetary policy independence, and I think the Fed needs to get back to its core mission.
Yeah, well, look, I made the point to Christine Lagarde last week. Jay Powell may very well have already violated this quote-unquote independence at the Federal Reserve when he first took office, immediately putting new climate change rules in place at the Fed. And first they said, oh, you got the mandate. The mandate is employment and inflation. And yet here we are with climate change rules and DEI rules that everybody is supposed to follow, not to mention cutting interest rates by 50 basis points right before a presidential election. And then after the election say, well, never mind. I'm not going to cut rates because I'm focused on inflation.
Well, again, I think it speaks to a groupthink that comes onto the board and a lack of openness, because I've spoken many times about, Alan Greenspan in the 90s was a visionary, and he could see what the productivity boom from the internet, from the adoption of office automation was doing. And there was this incredible productivity boom, and he knew what was coming, because he was looking forward, not the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
And I think there's a very good chance with this AI boom that we're seeing, we're going to see the productivity kick in as soon as the first quarter of next year. So I think everyone who's setting policy at the Fed, whether it's the board, the regional bank presidents, the staff, should have a bit of an open mind here. Well,
that's a great point, given the AI situation today and how it will change everything, growth numbers across the board and certainly business in general. Real quick before you go, Mr. Secretary, when shall we expect President Trump's announcement for his nomination for the chairman of the Federal Reserve once Jay Powell's term is up?
We're moving. There are 11 very strong candidates. President Trump knows some of them he doesn't. I'm going to begin talking to them after Labor Day, and there'll be some other folks around the White House who will also interview them. And we will present 3 or 4 candidates to the president. And like I said, he has a very open mind. He's very sophisticated on monetary policy, which I think drives some people at the Fed crazy, that they can't just dictate, okay, sir, here's the way it is. He has his own views. He's going to make those known. And I think that he has great reverence for the Fed as an institution, and I think he believes that it's lost its way, and that the new chair will be someone who is expert on monetary policy, regulatory policy, and knows how to run a sprawling institution, which the Fed is.
Sounds like we'll know who that is perhaps in the fall.
Surely.
All right. Secretary, great to see you this morning. Thanks so much for your leadership. What an incredible term. Thank you, sir. Welcome back. Let's check futures this morning. We're expecting a fractionally higher opening from the broader averages, although the S&P and the Nasdaq just went negative. The big story, of course, after the market closes tonight is Nvidia earnings, and that will likely set the tone for tomorrow. Joining me now to look at the business is the head of wealth at Citi, Andy Sieg, with us with insights on markets, policy shifts, and the wealth business coming up. Andy, great to have you.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Congratulations to you. Well, this is, I think, one of the first times I'm talking talking with you since you made the move from Bank of America to Citi.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, and I want to get something out of the way right before we start. There are reports out there that there has been a hostile environment, that you actually made an executive cry in front of colleagues. Citi has responded to these reports. Bloomberg and the New York Post. Citi writes this: Andy is a seasoned leader with decades of industry experience who has helped strengthen Citi wealth since joining in 2023. We remain confident in his leadership and focused on delivering for our clients. But what is your response to these allegations, Andy?
Well, no, thank you, Maria. We've known each other for a long time. Won't
Yes, we
surprise
have.
you that the stories themselves are not accurate. What I'd say overall is change is hard, and we've been driving a lot of change across Citi and in our wealth business. That change is working. I'm happy to say it's been fantastic to have the company very lined up and responding, as you just read to your audience, and we're on the move. And so this business is, the performance of the business has been transformed. We're going to keep driving that hard. One of the things I'm most proud of, the quality of talent that has risen up inside Citi and joined our part of the business from outside has been phenomenal. So we're moving ahead full speed.
So you've got colleagues that are supporting you, is what you're saying?
Oh, you know, across the board. Yeah. And so this is, hey, it's disappointing to see a story like that, but you know, but it's not throwing us off our game.
Well, I can understand change is hard. You've had to fire a handful of people as well, so that obviously is also difficult. Tell me about the business. What are you seeing in Citi's wealth division right now as we watch markets hit record highs?
Well, this is a wealth business like no other. We're unmatched in terms of how global this business is. And then in a place like New York, I mean, we have an incredible presence here through Citibank in New York and in other markets around the country. So when we look at this business, we think about the power of the brand, the client franchise, the talent that we have. Our objectives are, you know, very ambitious. We want this to be the #1 wealth business in the world, and we're on path to do that. And right now, we're not the biggest, but we're certainly one of the fastest growing, and you can see that over the last several quarters.
Well, I feel like Morgan Stanley really saw this early on in terms of bulking up its wealth business. What do you need to do to get there in terms of taking it to the next step? Is it scale? Do you need to acquire more assets under management?
Well, I mean, the first thing we needed to do was reorient the strategy, you know, make investment advice and providing investment advice central to what we're doing with our clients, get our cost base in line. We've done that. Now we have organic growth happening. There are things about this business that others can't touch. Morgan Stanley's done an amazing job, but their franchise and others nowhere near as global as Citi. I mean, Citi is an American bank, but we have a global network unlike anyone else. And wealth creation is not just happening in the U.S. Markets are spreading around the world. So when we look in Asia, phenomenal wealth creation across Asia. Even in a relatively slow-growing part of the world like Europe, incredible wealth creation. And among ultra-high net worth clients, globally investing, being globally minded, that plays to Citi's strengths.
President Trump has been able to lure big money investors and countries to invest in America, whether it's corporate America or, you know, the Saudis and individuals from the UAE. What are you seeing in terms of the investor today who wants to move money around? How attractive is the United States to them right now?
Well, I mean, the U.S. is incredibly attractive. I mean, when you think about the president's policies, I mean, the president's policies are now coming together in a way that investors around the world are recognizing. You've got, you know, the tariff regime in place alongside deregulation, alongside stimulus. You can see the market reaction to that. You know, it has defied the skeptics in terms of what's happening in the market. And so investors see that. And when they think about a financial institution, they love the idea of an American bank with the dynamism, the entrepreneurial strength of an American bank, but with global DNA, which makes it very easy for investors around the world to connect with us.
Well, I think that's a great way to say it. With DNA of investing across the world, where would you recommend your big clients to be allocating capital today when you look across the world?
Well, I mean, there's no market in the world like the U.S. I mean, you know, the U.S. is the global powerhouse economically. People forget, you know, we talk about the scale of the U.S., but, you know, the U.S. economy is larger than the combined next 4 economies in the world. If you put China, Germany, India, Japan together, it just barely matches the U.S. economy. So this dynamism, this level of innovation, the fact the U.S. is out in front on topics like AI, brings capital in. Now, Europe has been ignored for years by investors, and so there's some opportunities to take advantage of that valuation differential in Europe right now. So we do see some portfolios increasing European exposure, and again, many of our clients, our typical client is very globally minded, so they tend to have a fairly balanced global portfolio.
Yeah, when we were talking with Christine Lagarde last week, the president of the ECB, she was telling me how she's trying to lure investors to go invest in Europe. But I wasn't sure the backdrop was actually, strong enough. She's had to cut rates 200 basis points, 8 or 9 times in just 16 months.
Growth has been a challenge. Level of dynamism in the European economy is nowhere near what the U.S. economy or other economies around the world are showing. However, as I said, many of those equities have been under pressure for many years. There's some standout companies in Europe. So, an investor who understands these markets can pick up opportunities in Europe. But again, on a macro basis, all eyes are on the U.S.
Tell me your take on privates right now. A lot of investors want to get their hands on private companies, thinking that that's really the growth story of tomorrow. We just spoke with the commissioner from the Securities and Exchange Commission, as well as Secretary Scott Bessent, who is trying to open up the opportunities for individuals to invest in privates. Yep. What are you doing at Citi regarding that, and how do you see that? Well,
we see great interest in privates.
You do.
Of course, we want private companies as well as public companies to be able to finance themselves in the U.S. markets. That happens today. That's, again, a great strength of the U.S. We commend what the administration's doing with regard to private companies. Our investors, they want to have more access to direct private investments. They also want to see the secondary market increase for private companies as well. We help directly and indirectly. Partners, private equity firms, for example, create a pathway for investors to get exposure to privates. But family offices today are viewed by many private companies as a tremendous source of capital because they tend to be, the private companies have a long time horizon. They like family offices that tend to have a long time horizon as investors. It's a very dynamic part of our business.
We spoke with the Secretary about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac just a few moments ago. I want to play this sound and get your reaction, because I guess this is the deal that every bank on the street wants. Here's Secretary Scott Bessent with me moments ago. Watch.
That's what the banks have advised so far. A $30 billion deal would be one of the biggest deals, maybe the biggest deal in history. And these are very large companies, valuations in the hundreds of billions of dollars. So if we were to sell a 3 to 6% stake, it would work out to at least that.
Has the president decided on which bank will be the lead bank?
Well, every bank's going to be. All the big banks are going to be part of something that's this size, and we're honing in on that. The president's been busy doing peace deals, trade deals, tax deals, and he can multitask better than anyone I've ever seen.
Well, that was new information that they want to sell between 3 and 6% of their holdings in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Are you expecting to be part of that deal?
We sure hope so. This is going to be one of the largest, most exciting offerings in world history, and so all eyes are going to be on this deal.
Do you think there's investor interest?
Oh, there's incredible investor interest, and hey, we've been proud. Jane Fraser, who you know well, Jane had an opportunity to be with the president just a few weeks ago, and we're very hopeful that we're going to be able to play a role and to help support this.
What are the most important questions that you get from investors, from your client base, in terms of what they want to know right now?
Well, I think there's two different kinds of questions. Non-U.S. investors are, they are more focused on the deficit and the dollar. U.S. investors, not so much. U.S. investors are focused on the tax, on taxes overall, but they're not throwing money at stocks. This does not have the feeling of a late-stage bull market, and so we think this market's got a ways to run, and our clients want to make sure they're smart about it in terms of navigating some of the tax topics. That's top on their agenda.
As we all do. Andy, great to have you this morning.
Great to be here. Thanks again,
Maria. Thank you so much. Andy Sigg, running wealth at Citi. We'll be right back. That's Vice President J.D. Vance defending the federal government's investigation into former National Security Advisor John Bolton, pushing back against Democrats who are calling that raid on Friday on Bolton's home retribution. Remember, the FBI conducted a surprise raid Friday on John Bolton's Maryland home over claims that he sent highly sensitive classified documents from a private email server to his family during the first Trump administration. John Bolton right now has not been charged with any crimes. Joining me now is New York Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, a member of the House Intelligence Committee. Congresswoman, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks so much for being here. What is your reaction to that raid?
Yeah, interesting that John Bolton never said anything about the inappropriateness of raiding Mar-a-Lago because Jack Smith was not properly appointed, as the judge pointed out. So, look, he obviously hasn't been charged. This is part of the investigative process, and they'll see what the documents, what they say, and it'll lead to the justice. Unlike what we see in New York under Letitia James, where it's, malicious prosecution, abuse of process repeatedly, and she finally got slapped down by the appellate division. By the way, a left-leaning appellate division, which is good to see that actually justice for all is sometimes being supported in New York State, and that makes me feel good as a member of the New York Bar.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It feels like the chickens are finally coming home to roost, Congresswoman, after 10 years of attacks against President Trump and lies. I spoke with your colleague, Byron Donalds, about it, Congressman from Florida, yesterday. Here's what he said. Watch.
As I understand it, Maria, this was something that was being probed back during the end of the first Trump administration. Yeah. There were concerns that Mr. Bolton was sending classified information out of the SCIF, which nobody is allowed to do. Nobody's allowed to remove classified information, and apparently he was doing that. So this investigation is going to continue. One thing of note, it appears that the Biden administration sat on this information and did nothing. Once again, Democrats weaponizing government against their political enemies as opposed to upholding the law, regardless of where that goes. But I want to be clear. I have a security clearance. I review information in the SCIF. Members of Congress, agency staff, nobody is allowed to remove classified information.
Congressman, I want to move on to the crime crackdown, and the Trump administration reportedly planning to send National Guard troops into Chicago now. Much like what we saw in D.C., Washington being cleaned up right now. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, however, criticizing it, calling it, quote, a manufactured crisis and distraction. More than 900 people have been arrested in D.C. in just 2 weeks since the president's order to send those National Guard troops in there. That includes 5 known gang members and more than 100 illegal guns taken off the streets. Congresswoman, now we see Chicago pushing back. The mayor doesn't want the National Guard troops there. I guess they don't want to control the crime. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think it's great. I mean, I know the Democrats are melting down over this, but look what Kathy Hochul did. We had 2 prisons in New York State overrun by inmates. Imagine that, how bad the situation is. And she brought in the National Guard. Nancy Pelosi brought the National Guard in after January 6th. The National Guard is going to come in and give logistics and assist and help the police be able to enforce the laws. And look how great things are going in Washington, D.C. We've gone 9 days, I think almost 10 days now without a murder. And I've had even my own staffers, actually 3 of them, who one was held up at gunpoint, another one, a bullet grazed his leg. Another one was, almost carjacked down by Navy Yard, which is where I live. I mean, people in D.C. that actually live there are really happy with what's going on. There has to be rule of law. You can't operate a society without rule of law. It affects your business owners, everyone who's trying to live and make a living down in this part of in any of these cities, whether it's Washington, New York. And by the way, I surround Rochester, New York, which is always trending on X because it's one of the largest, most violent cities in the Northeast, and people would never think that. The former home, or still the home of Kodak and Bausch & Lomb and Xerox, all those great companies who've mostly moved out because of the horrible policies in New York State. But a lot of it has to do now with the crime. And this isn't just New York City. This is the crime laws in the state of New York, which are causing this to happen.
And when President Trump talks about Washington, I mean, I get it. This is the nation's capital. I mean, this is the entree into America, and we should make sure that region at a minimum is clean and looks perfect. But you're right. I mean, look at all of this crime. Speaking of crime, I want to get your take on this mayoral race. We are 2 months away. Mamdani is winning. I spoke with Andrew Cuomo, former governor, yesterday on Sunday Morning Futures, and he's talking about Mamdani's socialist proposals, saying it's a death knell for the Big Apple. Here's what he said. I got to get your take on this race. Watch.
There has been this internal debate going on in the Democratic Party where you have the extreme left, which are they are socialists. Let's call it what it is. Democratic socialists. No. they are socialists. It's Bernie Sanders, it's AOC, it's Assemblyman Mamdani. And classic socialists. Government should control the means of production. Government should be providing commodities. And as you said, free transportation, free food, free childcare, et cetera. And income redistribution by taxing the rich and taxing the corporations. It's antithetical to New York City to be anti-corporate. As you pointed out, New York City corporations are already high taxed, as are the individuals. And I think it would be a death knell for New York City, and he is dangerous, frankly, for New York City.
Claudia Tenney, your assessment of this race?
Look, I never thought I would say that Andrew Cuomo might be the lesser of two evils. There are other options, but I served under Andrew Cuomo. The Green Light Law in 2019 and a lot of the laws passed under his governorship are what's causing a lot of the problems, and then exacerbated by Kathy Hochul with the so-called criminal justice reforms, the bail reform. All these things are Andrew Cuomo legacies. So, you know, he tends to pander wherever he can get the votes, but he hasn't done a good job in the primary. But the Democrats have a real problem. These Democratic socialists are really Marxists. They are, you know, antithetical to everything we stand for. Our Constitution is about self-reliance, self-governance, not about a top-down government takeover. And I lived in a communist country. I can tell you, it's not going to end well for New York City, which, by the way, affects all of New York. The economy of New York, the financial center, is going to hurt, especially when you see these huge tax-paying billionaires and millionaires and people who are driving the economy leaving in droves. Many of them have already left, but you're going to see even more. So I think it's a real problem. You're going to see the housing market collapse. I know you guys talk about this all the time on this show.
Absolutely.
It's tough. It's going to be really tough for the state of New York, but somehow someone's got to push Mamdani, away from this Marxist ideology and this anti-Semitism, by the way, anti-police mentality, he's talking about nobody needs to serve in prison. No one can be accountable for their crimes. We're going to be doing handouts. It's kind of actually a form of fake populism of just giving everybody everything they want with no accountability. It's not going to end well for New York or New York State.
Curtis Sliwa is the only Republican. He can't seem to catch a bid. What's the story?
I think he's run for mayor a number of times. I got to be honest with you, I love Curtis Sliwa. I wish he would just take his red hat off and run as a new kind of guy. Don't run as your own persona. Run as the new mayor of New York City, not as your other job, because you're looking at a whole new mission running for the city of New York. Although crime is very important, and he's a great guy, but it's going to be a tough race. And unfortunately, with too many people on the ballot and too low voter turnout, you're going to end up seeing probably a Mamdani win.
Well, exactly. I think Mamdani's at 40%. Cuomo's at 25%. The other are in single digits. Congresswoman, it's great to see you.
Kevin O'Leary is with us this morning. I know where you stand on this. You are definitely not a fan of the government taking a role in private enterprise, are you?
No, not at all. What's broken? Nothing. The American economy for 200 years is the gem of the globe. The private sector has been working with the government for 200 years successfully. We remain the largest economy on earth. 52 cents of every dollar invested on earth comes here because of the policies we have in place. We let good companies thrive, and then when companies fail, they die like a slug on the bottom of the ocean, and the protein gets reabsorbed through private equity back into the winning management teams.
And they're turning around and saying you can't afford to lose the chip industry. You want to develop it in America to go after China.
Well, you're talking specifically about Intel. Yep. Intel lost its way a decade ago. It should have been sold a long time ago in pieces to the other players that emerged as winners. It's okay in the tech sector, and it's been proven for 100 years that technology evolves, management teams win and lose over time, and the system itself works so efficiently that we remain the envy of the world in tech. Don't mess with it. Intel is a dog. I would never put my own money into it, and I'm glad I didn't. It's where money goes to die, and I certainly don't want to put my tax dollars into it. I'm being force-fed a loser. I keep saying the same thing. Let it die. It's a grandmother on life support. It wants to die. And other people want to come and buy the pieces that are left. Nobody wants the product, Stuart. Who's going to... Okay, we put 10% in taxpayers' money into this. Nobody wants their products. Nobody. What are you going to do? Force feed the chips down a dog? Who's going to eat them? This is a really, really bad idea.
I think we got the message there. You've spoken loudly and clearly
I
on
speak
this.
the truth.
Yeah,
That's it.
okay. Look, immigration data, according to this new data, more Americans are fleeing to Canada. You're a Canadian, I believe. What's going on here?
Well, I have to be full disclosure. I always say this. I'm also Irish citizen, and I have a residency card, the UAE. I just want to get it out there, okay? My kids are all American, and they were born in Boston. So, you know, I'm a guy with feet in many countries. They're going to Canada right now for a bunch of different reasons. The immigration policy there is currently more liberal than it is in the U.S. Immigration has almost fallen to zero here, and a lot of people would like to start looking at that in a more organized legal fashion. But while it remains so tight, many people are taking advantage of policies that were put in place during the Trudeau era that have not been modified yet. And so in certain provinces like Alberta, which is booming.
So they're not fleeing America because they don't like it.
No.
They're going to Canada because there's opportunity there to get in and stay there.
And during the period where students, for example, weren't getting visas or were threatened not to be getting visas, some of them went to Canadian universities, and a lot of that's happening. But, you know, I am looking forward to, now that Canada is a more cooperative narrative with the U.S., a trade policy to be in place with them in a matter of 90 days. I think it's be good for both countries.
It would indeed. Good stuff. I want you to tell us about this trading card. You bought it for $12.9 million. You were part of the group that... You didn't buy it outright yourself, did you? You were part of a group that bought it. What's so special? There it is. What's that about?
Well, I'm very proud of this trade. I've been looking at this market now for 3 years. First got involved with Michael Rubin on the set of Shark Tank. He brought me into this thing called the hobby, and I met a guy named Shine, who's a legendary, the #1 guy collector in the world. And I said, you know, I'm going to look at fund flows. Just like modern art, contemporary art, look at that, because I like alternative asset classes. This asset class has a tremendous amount of funds flowing to it, but it's only to the pieces like a Jackson Pollock or a Warhol. You have to buy the high end. This turns out to be the #1 card on earth, the highest price ever paid. So I said, I'm going to figure out who's going to bid for it. I'm going to form a syndicate so I don't have a bunch of competitors, and then I'm going to buy it. It ended up only being between 2 global competitors. I thought this would be the beginning of a great index, because I'll never sell this card. This card will never be sold, but I'm going to buy more cards like it and build an indice. I think I'm going to go for a 5% weighting, like I have in gold and like I have in Bitcoin. 5% weighting in
New
cards.
asset class, but you've got to go super high.
I can't believe how much interest there is in this thing called the hobby. Every father-son loved this trade.
James Fishback is the CEO of Azoria, and he joins me now. James, you were at the Jackson Hole meeting last week. You asked Lisa Cook a direct question about mortgage fraud. She's been accused of mortgage fraud. Tell me what happened.
Good morning, Stuart. I was at the Jackson Hole conference presenting Azoria's new research model that shows that President Trump and Secretary Bessent are right. Interest rates are at least 1.7 percentage points too high. And there I see Lisa Cook walking into the lobby on Friday morning. I got my Starbucks in hand and I asked her about these mortgage fraud allegations very respectfully. Moments later, I am escorted out of the conference and I am handed a criminal trespass notice. I am told that if I come back and ask Lisa Cook any more questions, I am going to be arrested. This is perhaps the saddest analogy for the Federal Reserve in 2025. If you question them, if you push back, if you even so much as offer a different opinion, they will punish you. That is wrong and that is un-American.
You think well, there is going to be another new governor on the Federal Reserve Board. Do you have any idea who it might be? And does it force the board in the direction of cutting interest rates more quickly?
Well, let's be clear here about first what Lisa Cook is alleged to have done. A couple years ago, she got 2 mortgages on 2 homes in 2 separate states, signed these applications within 2 weeks of each other, claiming that both of these homes, Stuart, were her primary residence. That is a lie. That is fraud. It is called owner occupancy fraud. In fact, the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia quantified the risk of how this systemically poses to the housing market. Now, what this does is, by President Trump firing her, it, of course, to your point, opens up a vacancy on the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. I'm hearing David Malpass. I'm also hearing that Stephen Moran, who was appointed to Kugler's seat, may actually end up going to Cook's seat. And the reason why, Stuart, is because Cook's seat runs until 2038, where Kugler's seat was set to expire this January.
Do you think the market rallies significantly when we get the first of a series of interest rate cuts?
I think the market's done just fine. I think the market is looking through Jerome Powell's obstinance and looking through the fact that Lisa Cook is a deceitful miscreant. Everyone was saying last week that if Trump fired Lisa Cook, the stock market would crash and bond yields would go up. The exact opposite has happened. It's once again a repudiation of the expert class. President Trump is holding people accountable. In fact, if he did not hold Lisa Cook accountable, that would have posed a risk for markets because they would actually question the rule of law in America, and that's something that markets do not tolerate.
James Fishback, you are a tough guy. We'll see you again real soon.
Fox Business Alert now to the story of the day. Nvidia. Wall Street started the session kind of with a chip on its shoulder, sending shares of the AI chip king as low as $176. But right now, the stock is creeping its way back, and a few minutes ago actually came within striking distance of turning positive. Right now, it's down about 0.75% to $180. This after the company posted a beat on both the top and bottom line, missed slightly on key data center revenue. That number came in at $41.1 billion, just short of the $41.3 billion estimate. But that is still a staggering year-over-year surge of 56%. Overall revenue in Q2 came in at a record $46.7 billion. That is also up 56% from a year ago. Q3 revenue guidance coming in at $54 billion. Keep in mind that outlook includes zero sales to China of Nvidia's H20 chips. Nvidia's founder and CEO Jensen Huang is kind of in the hot seat, balancing the needs of shareholders with the desire of the Trump administration to control chip exports to China and make money off Nvidia's sales. The leader of America's first $4 trillion company is ready to talk about it. Jensen, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, Liz. Great to see you.
Good to see you, too. Listen, at $46.7 billion, you broke your sales record, and you expect to do it again, right, in the third quarter? Your sales guidance, $54 billion, is above Wall Street estimates. I need to know right off the bat, what customer demand are you seeing right now that gives you that confidence?
We are at the beginning of the AI revolution. In the last year, extraordinary progress was made in AI. AI can now reason, basically think, do research, use tools, solve problems. That's the reason why ChatGPT has become so good. Because, you ask it a question, and it goes off and thinks about it, does research, does things for you. It's incredible. And so we're seeing AI going into every industry. From, of course, the clouds, the enterprises, industrial with robotics and automation, and, of course, self-driving cars. Just everywhere we're seeing AI adoption really, really growing fast. Now, at the core of our business, we launched the second generation of the revolutionary Blackwell architecture. It's the first of its kind type of AI supercomputer. This is the second generation of Blackwell. We call Blackwell Ultra. The code name is GB300. Everybody calls it that. And we ramped $10 billion worth of GB300 in the first quarter. And next quarter we're going to ramp really, really hard. So we've got a lot of build out to go.
Yeah, it sounds like the fire is really hot. I mean, your second quarter earnings though did show, and everybody's talking about this, so we got to bring it up. Zero H20 chip sales to China, even though earlier this month President Trump reversed that ban on those sales in exchange for a 15% cut of your China revenues. And then the forecast for this quarter assumes again zero H20 chip sales to China. Are you guys just being conservative, or have you seen orders from China come to a halt?
We haven't seen orders yet, but we're hoping for orders. H20 is really a fantastic product still. The price performance, its cost efficiency, and its ability to generate AI tokens is really terrific. So I fully expect, and I hope for, POs for H20. America being able to have the world build AI and build software on the American tech stack helps America win. And President Trump understands this. And I'm very grateful that he approved the licenses of NVIDIA H20s for Chinese customers that are not on the entities list. And so I'm hoping we're now free to be able to sell to them. When the orders come in, we have some H20s built for this coming quarter if the orders come in. And so whatever comes in as a bonus on top of our guidance. And our guidance, as you know, is already quite significant.
And when those chip orders do eventually come in, quite frankly, I'm surprised you say that you haven't gotten any orders yet. But when they do come in, what kind of numbers, what kind of revenue do you foresee for that?
The AI market in China is probably about $50 billion to us. Several quarters ago, we were running umpteen billion per quarter. And then when H20 was banned, it went to zero. And so my hope is that we'll be able to go back and address a significant part of that $50 billion. And it's growing, just like the United States is growing. And the rest of the world is growing in AI. So the China market is definitely growing really fast, and I'm looking forward to it.
Well, you've made it clear you're eager to sell not just the H20, but even the Blackwell, your most powerful chip, to China. Have you had that conversation yet with the Trump administration?
I've started to have the conversation with them. I think that the conversation will take a while, but President Trump understands that having the world build AI on American tech stack helps America win the AI race. And he wants American technology all over the world, so that the whole world is built on the American standard, like the U.S. dollar is, the global standard. And so I'm very optimistic about it. I don't know the time frame for it, and we'll continue the discussion with him.
Let's say he says okay, but demands the same as he's demanded for the H20, and that's a cut of those revenues. I mean, has this precedent been set and you'll be forced to say yes?
I don't know that it's forced to say yes, but ultimately, it's in the best interest of the world, of our country, for us to be able to sell in China, have China's AI companies and AI researchers build AI on top of the American tech stack. And so whatever it takes to get it approved for us to be able to sell in China is fine with us. And we just want to make sure that the American tech stack is the world's global tech stack.
I get the motivation, and it may be fine with you, but is it fine with shareholders? I mean, you've got shareholders. What if they start asking, say, for example, whether it's the White House or Nvidia who gets to decide how much of the profits you make stay with the company?
These things have a way of working itself out, like pricing, as with all things. Ultimately, the more we sell, the better it is for America, and President Trump understands that. And so I'm delighted that we have H20 licenses approved, recognizing at all times that China has more and more alternatives. Their local companies are very competitive. This is a country with extraordinary skills and extraordinary capabilities, and manufacturing, as you know, is their home court advantage. And so we do not ever underestimate them. And so the sooner we get back in there and compete for a share of that marketplace, the better.
Listen, overall, you've got the kind of problem other companies are going to have, and that is demand far outweighing supply. Are you still there? I mean, we're hearing that for every one Blackwell chip, there are 10 different orders for them. Is that about right? And where are you in the supply balancing out with demand scenario?
Well, we did $46 billion, as you mentioned earlier today. And over the course of the next 5 years in this decade, I estimate probably about $3 to $4 trillion of AI factory infrastructure will be built out. Out of a gigawatt data center, for example, the gigawatt data center is like $50 billion all in. Out of that, about 30 to 35 billion of it is computing and networking and all the type of computing gear that Nvidia provides. And so Nvidia's opportunity within that $3 to $4 trillion within this decade is quite significant. So we're in the beginning of this build out, and so we have many years of growth ahead of us.
And it looks like it. I get that, but OpenAI, Sam Altman, you've partnered with him in the past, and you're doing so, I believe, with Stargate. But he mused recently that there is a bubble, and that basically would suggest that spending on AI cannot continue at this torrid pace. Do you see a bubble? Are you with him on that?
I see a very different picture. In fact, OpenAI is doing incredibly well. They just had their first $1 billion month. This is a company that was in generating revenues not so long ago, just about 18 months ago. And so it's extraordinary growth. In fact, if you take all of the AI natives companies, and there are so many of them that are doing well, Perplexity, Cursor, Abridged, so many. I mean, the list goes on. Of course, Google Gemini is doing incredibly well. Elon's Grok is doing incredibly well. And so there's so many different companies that are doing great in AI. This year, we estimate about $20 billion of AI native AI revenues from $2 billion last year, a tenfold increase in 1 year. And don't forget, AI has only been generating revenues for about 2 years. So in only 2 years' time, it's now $20 billion. You know, and that's just one. We see AI in enterprise as a result of open source models. We see AI in science with digital biology. We see AI in robotics and industrial manufacturing.
Yeah.
There's so many new factories are being built all around the world. So we're seeing AI everywhere.
Jensen, Nvidia just unveiled, this is sort of the futurist part of it, the Jetson Thor chip. This is the so-called robot brain that will enable people to train robots to develop them with so much more compute power. And eventually, I mean, we want to know how you see robots eventually, I guess, making decisions without human prompts. And where does this eventually take us? I'm asking you to put that futurist hat on.
Everything that moves will be robotic. Every car, every tractor, every excavator, of course, there's going to be robotic manipulators in factories, robotic movers for moving inventory around. There will be robotic humanoid robots that are very general purpose. We're going to see robotic systems of all different kinds. They're going to be in hospitals doing robotic surgery. They're going to be in factories building things. They're going to be in farms doing agriculture. I mean, it's just incredible, the number of robotic systems. Every single robotic company or industrial company will have two factories. There's the factory that builds the machines, and then there will be a factory that does the AI, that processes the AI factory, to create the brain that runs in the robot. And so NVIDIA covers the entire spectrum of computing for AI, everything from the cloud to enterprise on-prem to robotic systems. And so it's going to be a really exciting future. And we're going to have all kinds of machinery help us do things.
And that would mean that it's helping people have more free time. I mean, you talk about productivity gains. So that really becomes the big question. How do you envision our world changing? Do we start to see every country go to a 4-day work week because productivity gains from AI have been so meaningful? I mean, do you see the chatbots become people's friends so dating apps go away? In your mind, what are those future prospects?
I have to admit that I'm afraid to say that we are going to be busier in the future than now. And the reason for that is because a lot of different things that take a long time to do are now faster to do. And I'm always waiting for work to get done because I've got more ideas. Most countries and most companies have more ideas than we know what to pursue. And so the more productive we are, the more opportunity we get to go pursue new ideas. I fully expect GDP to grow. I expect productivity to increase. I actually expect us to have more things to do. It is probably the case, and Liz, I'm hopeful for that day too, so that we have 4-day work weeks, and so that we could, spend more time on the weekends with family and get some reading done and do some traveling, and nothing is better than that. We came from a world of 7-day work weeks, and now we're in 5-day work weeks. And every industrial revolution leads to some change in social behavior. But I expect the economy to be doing very well because of AI and automation, and I expect us to enrich our lives. Life quality will get better, of course, over time. Some jobs will go away. Many jobs will be new and invented. But one thing for sure, every job will be changed as a result of AI.
Jensen, it's a fascinating time, and people should take note of NVIDIA's position in all of this, but also where we go in the future. Thank you so much for joining us.
Liz, it's great to see you. Thank you.
I think there's a good likelihood of it being a CR again. I think part of it's just been the problem over the last almost 30 years where we haven't passed appropriations on time. And so I think it's a bad habit that we've gotten into. We're hearing some comments back and forth from some of the Democrats that, you know, if the president's going to look at rescissions to cut out wasteful spending, that they're not going to agree to an appropriations process.
It's going to be another continuing resolution, which no one likes, military particularly, because those who are in the middle of leases and firms that are supplying not just the military. We got the Farm Bill, we've got DOD, Department of Defense. So I would assume it's going to be another CR, and I think it'll barely pass in the House, probably the Senate as well.
Lawmakers on this program this week predicting the need for a continuing resolution to keep the government funded and avoid a shutdown next month. The House is going to be back in session Tuesday. The GOP is warning Democrats may resist the GOP-led appropriations process. I want to bring in Florida Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart. He's the vice chair of the House Appropriations Committee, Congressman. So this is going to be front and center for you and your colleagues on your committee when you get back to work next week. What do you make of those comments that were probably just going to get another CR, which it's almost one of these things where you see lawmakers holding their nose and voting for it anyway?
Yeah, well, Cheryl, thanks again for the opportunity. It would be disastrous to have another continuing resolution. It means that we can't do any real changes. We can't do new starts in defense. And we're stuck with, in essence, the last Biden appropriations bill. So it would be disastrous. I think a couple of things. The Appropriations Committee, we're getting our work done. We're moving forward. We're ready, and we will be ready to negotiate with the Senate. The question is going to be what the Democrats are willing to do, because whether we like it or not, ultimately, it requires passing it in the House, negotiating with the Senate, and that requires 60 votes. So the Democrats have a voice whether we like it or not. And are they willing, and will they be willing, to negotiate in good faith? And negotiating in good faith also means negotiating with the White House.
Well, but the thing is, after the big, beautiful bill passed, and obviously extending those tax cuts was front and center, there's still a lot of fiscal hawks out there, and I'm thinking about Senator Rand Paul, for example, that Ron Johnson has made these comments that, you know, there needs to be more cutting. That is something that you and your colleagues could be responsible for. Do you see any path forward where you're going to see some meaningful cuts to spending?
Yes. As a matter of fact, if you want spending cuts, you have to get the appropriation bills passed and negotiated. And let me just give you an example as to why I say that. The subcommittee that I chair, we actually have a reduction of 22% from the CR from last year. And pretty much every subcommittee of appropriation, except for the three that the president has asked more money for, which obviously he's asked for more money for defense. We're doing that. More money for veterans and national security and, homeland security. Other than those three, all of the other subcommittees show dramatic decreases in spending. So if you want to cut spending, you have to get the appropriation bills passed. The question is, are the Democrats going to be willing to negotiate, or is the Trump syndrome so much in their head that they just can't sit down and negotiate with the Republicans? Mm-hmm. It's really going to be up to them whether they want to shut down the government or, again, keep a continuing resolution, which is really, really devastating for our country.
Well, I mean, he's still got, 130 people to be confirmed by the Senate, and they've been fighting him on that. Chuck Schumer has. So it kind of seems like the writing is on the wall, so it's going to be a fight. I want to ask you about this. The U.S. Navy reportedly sending at least 7 vessels, including 3 guided missile destroyers, to the waters off Venezuela to combat threats from Latin American drug cartels. Venezuela's defense minister announcing a significant drone deployment in response, including naval patrols along the Caribbean coast. Congressman, I want to get your reaction to this, because obviously the violence in Venezuela that we've seen has driven, in part, that mass migration that we saw towards the U.S. border under Joe Biden.
Yeah, you see, the Venezuela is not controlled by a government. It's actually been taken over by a narco cartel, El Cartel de los Soles, which is a terrorist organization. Look, President Trump is the president of peace, the president of prosperity, but also, as he's demonstrating every single day, the president that wants to keep the American people safe. And he is right to designate these cartels as terrorist organizations. The Cartel de los Soles is responsible for the death of multiple Americans. This is a president that's not willing to stand idly by while Americans are dying. And so I commend the president for his leadership, for taking a firm stand against these narco cartels. And look, let's see what the cartel the leaders of that cartel want to do. They have an opportunity still to kind of find another place to go and get the heck out of Dodge. If they don't, I think they're going to run into President Trump's resolve, his resolve to protect the American people. I commend him for his leadership. I support him. And thank God for President Trump's leadership and his courage. And he's showing it every single day.
Well, okay, along this line of this topic, President Trump's crackdown on these dangerous drug cartels, it is working. The co-founder of the Sinaloa cartel, known as El Mayo, confessing to a decades-long coordination effort with Mexican officials to smuggle drugs into the U.S. He's set to face the rest of his life now behind bars, Congressman. So, you know, if this tactic is working with these Mexican cartels, you're saying that you're hoping that that will extend into what we're seeing in Venezuela.
Well, look, I know that the president is committed to protecting the American people. Whether the cartel in Venezuela decides to, close shop and move out of there, or they decide to try to confront President Trump, it's up to them. But I will tell you, just ask, again, the Sinaloa cartel, or ask ISIS, that other terrorist group that President Trump eliminated using our brave men and women of the armed forces. Ask them if it's a good idea to confront President Trump. And I think the answer is pretty obvious. This is a president who is not willing to just sit around and wait to see what happens while Americans are dying. He is going to protect the American people, the rule of law, and doing so, while he is the president of peace, he's also the president of strength and the president of prosperity and the president that protects the American people. I could not be more proud of serving with President Trump.
Well, and certainly, that is why the trade argument with the country of Mexico, you got to remember that he's got to get the president of Mexico to come down on those cartels, the fentanyl trading. I mean, it's been a deadly scourge on our country. So I understand why he's taking the actions that he is. Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart, it's always great to see you. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
All right. We're looking forward to next week when you get back to Washington, sir.
Just days after taking a 10% stake in Intel, President Trump is signaling plans to pursue similar investments in other major companies, creating a new model for how government engages with big business. Watch.
I want to try and get as much as I can. In the case of Intel, it was interesting, but I hope I'm going to have many more cases like it. Intel came in. I'd like you to give 10% of Intel to the United States of America. Not to me, to the United States of America. I just made $10 billion or $11 billion for the United States of America. And yeah, there will be other cases. If I have that opportunity again, I would do that.
Joining me now is the Treasury Secretary of the United States, Scott Bessent. Mr. Secretary, it's always a pleasure. Thanks so much for being here.
Morning, Maria.
And we wanted to start there because, of course, if you're a free market capitalist, oftentimes you don't want to see government taking stakes in businesses. But I wonder if this is a national security issue more than anything else. Can you walk us through your thinking and the president's thinking in terms of taking a 10% stake in Intel and what could happen next?
Sure, Maria. And look, if we go back to, say, the COVID times, we could see that there was an airline rescue plan, and a lot of that was debt. And I can tell you some of that debt is still outstanding at 1%. So it was a good deal for the American people to keep the airlines flying, but financing private businesses still at 1% was not a good deal. And what President Trump is doing, President Trump is going to be the only president in modern times who creates assets for the American people rather than debt. And we looked he saw that Intel had been given grants and wanted to know why the American taxpayer wouldn't participate in the upside. So there's $11 billion of immediate value, and I think there's a very good chance here that it could be much more. But as you said, chips are a strategic necessity for us. One of the things we learned during COVID was that the United States has 5 to 7 strategic vulnerabilities in critical industries, and President Trump has said about de-risking that. And while we're de-risking it, there's also substantial upside for the American taxpayer.
Well, it's very hard to argue with free money and the fact that the support for Intel was already there from the CHIPS Act, and the president turning that into equity and the government having a stake and creating this value of $11 billion is pretty incredible. It's hard to argue with that, but are you considering taking stakes in further semiconductor companies? I mean, would the president consider taking a stake in Nvidia?
Well, Maria, I don't think Nvidia needs financial support. You know, that seems not on the table right now. But could there be other industries where, you know, that we're reshaping, something like shipbuilding? That sure. There could be things like that, and these are critical industries that we have to be self-sufficient in the United States. And for 20, 30, 40 years, this was neglected. And as I've said many times, the only good thing about COVID was it was a beta test for if we were to go into a kinetic war or get cut off from some of these industries. You know, think about it. 80–90% of the precursor pharma products are made overseas, and that's just unacceptable because, you know, as we saw during COVID, the manufacturing countries will keep it for themselves.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it took a businessman in the Oval Office to really see the upside of some of these things. You mentioned shipbuilding. What about defense companies? I mean, this is obviously an area where the U.S. has to win. And is it a serious consideration to take any stakes in some defense companies?
I don't know if we need to take stakes in defense companies. You know, we'll see whether the defense companies are fulfilling their mission in terms of providing adequate and timely deliveries for the U.S. military, as opposed to maybe an overemphasis on the shareholders. You know, what we saw with Boeing, you know, think about what happened to Boeing, which was one of our great American companies. Rather than spending money on R&D and you know, new plane development, they did this massive share buyback. A CEO walked out with $250 million, a failed CEO, and it has crippled one of America's great companies for several years. So, you know, we do have to think about, with all these companies, what is the mission?
So should other shipping companies, should other semiconductor companies be worried about political influence or, you know, Intel getting a better treatment than other companies? All of the issues that any free market capitalist would think about with regard to government owning stakes in companies.
No, look, I think the other semiconductor companies, they have done well, but again, what we've ended up with is 99% of the advanced chips in the world are manufactured on the island of Taiwan, and that's a national security risk like we haven't seen since the Arab oil embargo. So, you know, we just have to de-risk several aspects of the U.S. economy.
Well, you also, yep, I'm sorry.
And as you said, President Trump's a businessman, and he's very solution-oriented. It's inconceivable to me that administration after administration has just let these strategic risks just sit around.
Yeah.
And you know, there's a group of us in this administration, led by President Trump, who believe that if we leave office in January 2029 and we have not de-risked the U.S. economy, then we have failed, and we are not going to fail.
And you've talked about this since just the beginning of the second term, the president's second term, and you've done this in a number of ways, whether it be the golden share in the Nippon-U.S. steel merger or the 15% revenue from Nvidia and AMD sales to China. Even with Fannie and Freddie, you already have, it's conservatorship, and you're going to be taking some of that public. What are your plans for Fannie and Freddie? Are you expecting to do an IPO of some $30 billion later on this year, sir?
Maria, we're not sure on the timing. There's a lot of work to be done, but again, there's substantial value for the American taxpayer there. We are moving deliberately and forward on this, and we'll see on the timing. We've had meetings with all the big banks, and there are a couple of things there. One, the structure of the U.S. mortgage market. We're committed to making sure that there is no change in the spread mortgage over treasuries. We actually believe there are things that can be done to make mortgages cheaper for the American people. And then on the other side, these are tremendously valuable companies. And President Trump wants to realize some of the value.
Well, this is huge value there. You're talking about $7 to $8 trillion in assets under management between these two companies. We're talking about a $30 billion deal. Do you look at that and say we don't even want to sell more than that because you want to keep some conservatorship? You want to keep some stake there in Fannie and Freddie?
That's what the banks have advised so far. A $30 billion deal would be one of the biggest deals, maybe the biggest deal in history. And these are very large companies, valuations in the hundreds of billions of dollars. So if we were to sell a 3 to 6% stake, it would work out to at least that.
All right, so a 3 to 6% stake, if you sell 5%, that's the kind of numbers you're talking about. Secretary, have you decided, has the president decided on which bank will be the lead bank? I know every bank is clamoring for it.
Well, every bank's going to be, all the big banks are going to be part of something that's this size, and we're honing in on that. The president's been busy doing peace deals, trade deals, tax deals, and he can multitask better than anyone I've ever seen. I have trouble keeping up. So, I imagine sometime in September, early October, we'll be making a decision.
All right, and then maybe you'll have one lead and several others below the lead. Is that the thinking?
One lead, two leads, and then a deal of this size, every firm on the street is going to be involved.
Yeah.
And we want a high-quality group of institutional, international investors, and we're going to carve out some for the American people.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of bankers. They already tell me that this expectation is already oversubscribed, that you've got people wanting in right now, and we don't even have it on the books yet. Let me move on to the tariff, Secretary, because President Trump's 50% tariff on India kicking in today, weeks after adding that 25% penalty over India's purchases of Russian oil and weapons. Meanwhile, India is vowing to retaliate. India's foreign minister says if the U.S. does not like India buying Russian oil, it should not buy from India. Mr. Secretary, your thoughts?
Look, Maria, this is a very complicated relationship. President Trump and Prime Minister Modi have very good relationships at that level. And it's not just over the Russian oil. The Indians came in very early after Liberation Day to start negotiating on tariffs, and we still don't have a deal. I thought that we would have a deal in May, June. I thought India could be one of the earlier deals. And they've kind of tapped us along in terms of the negotiations. And then there is also the aspect of the Russian crude purchases, which they've been profiteering on. So there are many levels going on here. I do think India is the world's largest democracy. The U.S. is the world's largest economy. I think at the end of the day, we will come together. I think a lot of it by the Indians has been performative. But I will tell you, Maria, I've said this all along during the tariff negotiations. The U.S. is the deficit country. When there is a schism in trade relations, the deficit country is at an advantage. It's the surplus country that should worry. So the Indians are selling to us. They have very high tariffs, and we have a very large deficit with them.
Do you worry that India is going to set trade in the rupee and they'll do trade with the rupee currency with the BRIC nations instead of the U.S. dollar?
There are a lot of things I worry about. The rupee becoming a reserve currency isn't one of them.
Right. No, I thought you would say that.
It's, on this trade problem with us, I think the rupee is near an all-time low versus the U.S. dollar.
Yeah, great point. Look, I spoke with the president of the European Central Bank over the weekend, Christine Lagarde, and I pushed her on this $300 billion in Russian assets that is sitting in Europe. What do you want to see here? Because I'd like to see others do what you and President Trump have been doing in terms of pressuring the world to stop doing business with Russia as a way to stop this war on Ukraine. What do you want to see for that $300 billion that is Russian assets sitting in European banks right now? I know it's frozen, and the EU has said that they'll use the interest on that money to rebuild Ukraine. But shouldn't all of that money go toward rebuilding Ukraine to ensure that Putin doesn't get his hands on that money anymore?
So, Maria, let's think about two things here, Maria. One, we could use a more fulsome the assist from our European partners here as President Trump is trying to end this war in Ukraine that never would have started if he'd been president. And our European allies need to step up. I don't see them threatening the tariffs on the Indians. And as a matter of fact, they're the ones buying the refined products that's made from the Russian oil.
Right.
So, the Europeans call the secondary tariffs. There's a bill going through the U.S. Senate. The Europeans call it the Graham bill because of sponsor Senator Lindsey Graham, and it gives the president authority, which he already has, but Senate backed authority to put on high secondary tariffs. And at the G7 meeting, I asked our European allies, the G7 allies, if they were willing to join, and only Canada was willing to join. So the U.S. should not be expected to shoulder this alone.
Right.
This war is in their backyard. They have a vested interest in ending it just like we do. And President Trump is the only one who has created forward motion on this. And the U.S. people should not be expected to shoulder all the burden. Right. So the 400 and whatever million people in the European Union who want this to end should also be part of the solution. Number two, on the frozen Russian assets, I think that's all part of the negotiation with President Putin. So I don't think we should seize them immediately.
I see.
And it is a chip on the table during this big negotiating process, and we will see whether part of that goes to the Ukraine rebuild.
Okay. Mr. Secretary, I want to ask you about China. Let's take a short break, but I know one top Chinese trade official is headed to Washington this week, and I'd love to get your take on the formal negotiations underway. Stay with us. We are talking with the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, and we'll be right back with more.
I'm not going to use the term great, big, beautiful. That was good for getting it approved, but it's not good for explaining to people what it's all about. It's a massive tax cut for the middle class. And I don't know. It should be simple, but a lot of people didn't understand it.
President Trump talking about rebranding the big, beautiful bill now that it's law and with a midterm election coming up. Joining me now is Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor, and author of Trump's Triumph, America's Greatest Comeback. Great to see you, Mr. Speaker. Thanks for being here. The president has so much on his plate. I mean, I haven't seen a president this busy since the last time he was president, but he knows how to make a sale like no one else. Do you think he can do that? Because he's behind. We'll say exactly how much in a moment, but he is behind on the economic issue.
Yeah, look, I think he'll be behind for a little while, but I think ultimately by next summer we will be in a boom, and it will be obvious that all the investments, all the overseas sales, all of the tax breaks, all of the deregulation, all of the cuts of wasteful spending. The cumulative effect will be pretty amazing, I think, by the summer of 26. But, you know, this bill, when you break it down, you get beyond the immediate headline, and you realize, for example, on Medicaid, it stopped paying illegal immigrants. Now, the Democrats really want to go and campaign that they're in favor of paying illegal immigrants on Medicaid. It stops able-bodied adults who refuse to work. That's like an 80 or 90% issue for the American people. They don't want to pay adults who are capable to do nothing. The Democrats really want to be the people who block that. When you take the bill apart and you begin to go step by step, it would have been the largest tax increase in history. So a no vote by the Democrats in the House and the Senate was in effect functionally a vote for the largest tax increase in history, which the American people deeply oppose. And I think you just have to take the bill step by step, walk people through it, which, you know, I think can be done. And I think the people at Ways and Means in the House, for example, have done a brilliant job of putting together in a whole series of press releases and speeches exactly how powerful this bill is going to be.
Well, we have some good news that came out today, and it continues to roll out rather slowly, but it does roll out. We got a GDP revision of 3.3% for the year. That's a big growth rate, and it's 2 points higher than it was expected to be. It was expected to be 3.1%. We had mortgage rates fall. That's going to mean a lot to people that are trying to buy a house. But these numbers are bothersome. He's still stuck with the bad approval rating on economics. I think we can put it up. The Gallup poll shows him with a 37% approval on economic policies. For his entire first presidency, he had a 52% approval rating on the economy from Gallup as well. So that's apples to apples, and it doesn't look so good. Why is it? What is it that the American public doesn't get?
Look, I think the turmoil about the tariffs, where people didn't understand what he was doing, where a lot of the negotiations were in public, seemed confusing. I think the Democrats ran an all-out, and so did most of the propaganda media of the left, ran an all-out campaign to try to smear the bill and to make it look bad. But look, I just watched today as Caroline Leavitt laid out the fact that this particular weekend, people go out to drive, they're going to have the lowest gasoline price in 5 years. Now, that's real. That's an effect. That's in people's pocketbooks. And my hunch is that by early next year, Trump's job approval on the economy will be back up where it was in his first term or higher. Because I just believe it's a matter of fundamentals. When you have things like reducing, it took 39 years to depreciate a factory. Under the new bill for the next 6 years, it takes 1 year.
Right.
So the incentive to go out and build, for example, the new computing centers is going to be just enormous.
What about, he talks about providing simplification, make the whole thing simple. What about going back to the idea of simplifying the tax code? Maybe you have a rescission, another attempt at rebranding and sort of tweaking the tax bill to get rid of some of the tax brackets. We still have 7 tax brackets. It's enormously complex. Maybe get that down to 3 or something.
You know, I participated in that with Reagan. He had a first big tax cut bill in '81. Then he came back, and we passed a huge tax simplification bill late in his term that was very effective and that clearly helped accelerate economic growth. And that's the key to all this. Not to sound like Larry Kudlow, but it's true. If you can get the economy growing, if you can get people going to work, you take them off of food stamps, you take them off of welfare, you take them off of other government dependencies, have them earning a living and paying taxes. You change the whole long-term perspective of the country. And I think that's got to be a key to this. And I like the idea, probably not before the election in 26, but certainly in 27, 28, looking seriously at a second big tax bill that would dramatically simplify the code. And I think, by the way, the American people would love to have a much simpler tax code.
Yeah, and on the rescission side, I said rescissions instead of, I should have said reconciliation, but there is still the questions about rescissions, and in particular pocket rescissions, which is a rather complex vehicle to have the president essentially do something like a line item veto. Is that still on the table?
Well, I think they'll try it out and see whether or not they can get it past the Supreme Court. I also think that Speaker Johnson believes ultimately they'll maybe do one more rescission this fall and then another rescission early next year. Because as you know, under the Senate rules, the rescission is the one bill that takes 50 Republicans plus the vice president to pass it. Where they're going to have a bigger challenge is the continuing resolution if they need one. If they can't get all the appropriations bills passed in September, and then you've got to go in the Senate to getting 60 votes, and that means you somehow have to get 7 Democrats to agree to vote with you. That's going to be a much harder, bigger challenge than the rescission bill.
Do Republicans hold the House in the midterms?
Probably gain maybe 10 to 20 seats.
Whoa.
That's my guess.
All right, we have you on tape. Newt Gingrich, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Russia's foreign minister is casting doubt over the push for peace in Ukraine. He says there's no planned meeting between Putin and Zelensky, and key issues, including the dispute over the Donbass region, remain unresolved. Retired 4-star General Jack Keane joining me now. General, diplomacy is at a standstill. Where's this thing going?
Yeah, well, it remains to be seen, certainly. All the optimism we had as a result of the president talking to Putin in Alaska and coming out of that meeting, thinking that, he was willing to talk about security guarantees for Ukraine and possibly a meeting with President Putin and Zelensky itself. That led to what we all witnessed was something quite historical and unique, and that is all the European leaders showing up here in Washington, D.C. the following Monday after he made a phone call that night when he finished a meeting with Putin and Zelensky as well, all leading towards putting together a plan which has been going on for days now, led by the Pentagon and the State Department, in terms of what should these security guarantees be for Ukraine. The Europeans' participation and the United States obviously is what's being discussed. So all of that optimism and that momentum is moving forward, thinking that certainly the next step would be, as previously discussed, a meeting between President Putin and President Zelensky. But here we have Lavrov, the foreign minister who's been at Putin's side for over 20 years, on an American talk show this weekend, saying nothing of the kind. There'll be a meeting when the agenda is right, and right now the agenda is not right. And what is he talking about there? Well, they're still putting on the table for Ukraine to give up all that territory in the Donbass, territory that they haven't been able to take in 3.5 years. And they're also talking about the fact that there should be no membership in NATO. And then, given the fact that security guarantees was the subject of all the discussion in Washington, D.C., Lavrov says there'll be no Western troops in Ukraine. Well, first of all, he doesn't have a veto over something like that. That's Ukraine's security, and the Europeans, the United States, want to help them with it. So what does it mean? It looks like they're pushing back on that meeting and doing what we've seen before, Stuart, which is delay, stall, under the cover of negotiations. So that's kind of where we are. It must be disappointing for the Trump team here to be dealing with this. I mean, hopefully they're talking privately and we're getting public declarations, and maybe there's some progress there. But I got to believe that the Trump administration is putting together a plan to leverage the Russians.
Yeah.
Tough tariffs and sanctions that you've talked about in detail, and also open up Russia offensively to Ukraine to be able to attack deep into Russia, give them the weapons to do it, and then tell the Russians also, not only are we going to do that, we're going to make certain the Ukrainians got all the weapons they need to stop your offense that's going on right now, and also for them to be able to counterattack.
I can't imagine.
I think we got to look at the fact that leverage is part of the peace process, Stuart. The leverage is important, and we may be at that stage where we got to use it.
Got it. One more for you, General. The Defense Department reportedly planning to send the military into Chicago as part of Trump's crackdown on crime. Do you support using our military resources in our own cities?
Well, given the fact that crime is at epic stages, and I think we've seen that in Washington, D.C., which its homicide rate leads the nation, and the fact is, if it was a state, it would be the leading state of murders in the country. And what has happened as a result in just 12 days, no murders, over 900 people arrested. I've been out, I go into D.C., I live in Northern Virginia, but I go to church in D.C., and I go out into the city for other reasons. And the National Guard presence, it feels different that they're there, Stuart. And I think they have a presence of orderliness, law and order, even though they're not carrying weapons and they're not moving around like police do. But the fact that they're there seems to provide some stability. It keeps the criminals away. You would think there would be cooperation between these mayors, like Mayor Bowser is with President Trump, in these other cities that would welcome some federal resources to help them with problems. We all know they have significant staffing problems. It's unfortunate that the mayors are not willing to cooperate.
It's not the end of democracy as we know it, is it?
Far from it. It seems to me one of the fundamental things of a democratic society is to protect its people. And we have elected people to do that. That's the obligation, the first obligation they have to them, to provide safe communities where they can live with their children, send their kids to schools, go to the market, and go to work. That's fundamental to the success of a democratic republic. And we're having major failure in these cities in doing that.
Nobody's ever done this before. Well, maybe some administrations have done this before, but not on the scale that Mr. Trump is doing it now. And it's having results. I call it the revolution. I think Trump has engineered a revolution because he's doing things exactly differently from the previous administration. So last 30 seconds to you, if I may.
Yeah, well, I think the awareness of the fact that here we have the President of the United States, and obviously all the issues that he has to deal with as president, and we just dealt with one in Ukraine. There's also Iran and the Middle East and China, and the list goes on, and the border, which he successfully closed. But he looks at, I haven't had this discussion with him, but he looks at the American people as his responsibility. And even though we have local officials, you know, who have the resources and the means to protect them, he feels an obligation to do something about it. At a minimum, he's raising huge awareness about the problem, and he's got to be forcing these leaders in these communities as a result of what he's threatening to do, you know, to start focusing on this problem and get these criminals off the street and get the guns off. This isn't rocket science.
No.
I mean, we got people running around with guns and shooting people. In Chicago this weekend, you know, the mayor's saying he doesn't want any help. 27 shootings, 4 stabbings, Stuart, this weekend. They take that as normal. They accept it. It's kind of in their DNA. How tragic is that?
General, I'm out of time, but this is a unique presidency. General Keane, thanks for joining us, sir. Always a pleasure. I'll see you again soon. Got it.
You betcha.
Joining me now is Steve Moore, host of More Money on WABC Radio, and James Fishback, CEO of Azoria. Gentlemen, good to see you both. Thanks. James, I just want to set this up. This may take a little while, but there are a lot of folks out there saying, well, so what? What she did is no big deal. As a matter of fact, in 2023, an estimable agency known as the Federal Reserve Board came out with a product, an informational memo, if it is, a long one, and the abstract of it says the following. These fraudulent borrowers, such as Lisa Cook, perform substantially worse than similar declared investors, defaulting at a 75% higher rate. That is huge. Their defaults are also likelier to be strategic, suggesting that they pose a risk in the face of declining house prices. So these could really harm, what she is accused of doing could really harm the economy. In fact, there's a lot of evidence that 2008 2009 financial crisis was caused by subprime loans, some of which were developed by these schemes of claiming your residence in two houses to get a better mortgage deal. Now, she has not been charged yet, it is true, but she hasn't produced any evidence that what is being claimed about her is untrue. So where does all this stand legally? I mean, without a charge, can the president still fire her?
Well, good afternoon, David. He absolutely can. Look, Lisa Cook was credibly accused and criminally referred by U.S. Housing Director Bill Pulte last week. Within 24 hours, she put out a statement scoffing it all off, calling it a tweet, and not actually denying the underlying allegation that in the span of 2 weeks, she got 2 mortgages on 2 properties, both claiming that they were somehow her primary mortgage. That's called owner occupancy fraud. It is a federal crime, Title 18 U.S. Code 1014. The DOJ prosecutes these cases all the time. She did not bother denying it. Now, here's the truth. Under Section 10 of the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, the President of the United States, him alone, can remove a member of the Board of Governors, quote, for cause. In the Humphreys executive case before the Supreme Court in 1935, they defined for cause one of 3 ways: inefficiency, neglect of duty, and in the case of Lisa Cook, malfeasance. Malfeasance, according to the Oxford Dictionary, is wrongdoing. What is more wrong than lying to the American government, lying to a bank, getting 2 mortgages that you did not deserve, getting an artificially lower rate, an artificially lower down payment, and an artificially higher chance of approval? Lisa Cook's job is to guard against mortgage fraud and to protect the financial system, not to commit mortgage fraud and undermine the financial system.
And Steve, it is quite clear in this report. And by the way, you can find it on the internet. It's the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, 2023. The title is Owner Occupancy Fraud and Mortgage Performance. It gets into the details, and it mentions, by the way, the number of all the loans made between 2005 and 2017, 584,000. 22,000 of those were using these fraudulent practices, like the one she apparently did. And that really jumped right before the 2008-2009 financial crisis. So what she did and what others like her have done could really cause a financial crisis.
Oh, great point. And by the way, James, I think you convinced me. I was a little undecided about this, but you make a great prosecutor here. I think that you're right about some of the facts of this case. As you may recall, David, I was nominated to be on the Federal Reserve Board. So I've gone through this process, and it's like a proctology exam. I mean, you have to, all the financial disclosure, all the stuff. It's amazing to me, by the way, that somehow this got through. This was not discovered, when she was up for nomination. But I think you guys make a good point that if this were something that unrelated to the job of being on the Federal Reserve Board, I'd say, well, let's wait to see what happens with her. Right. But the fact that this is, as you just said, David, this is the kind of behavior that led to the financial crisis, that makes her not qualified for the job.
And the Federal Reserve says that. It's not us saying it. It was the Federal Reserve, the Bank of Philadelphia Federal Reserve, that actually spelled out how it could happen. Now, James, she's not going anywhere, according to the recent statement by the Federal Reserve. They said essentially, they didn't come out specifically and say this, but the full weight and support of the Federal Reserve was with her until the time there was some kind of court appearance or court order about what she did. So they're standing pat. That's a formidable object to go against, right?
It absolutely is. The question that the president needs to ask Jerome Powell right here, right now, is Lisa Cook allowed into the building? Does she have access to her email? Is she showing up to meetings where confidential information is shared about a range of issues, including and especially the type of mortgage fraud that she is credibly accused of having committed? Right here, right now, whatever you think about her, she deserves to be set aside, and this process can play out in the courts. Lisa Cook has a right to challenge anything. She will lose. This is a clear-cut case where she committed fraud. And here's the truth, David. It takes 776 days on average for the Department of Justice to go from charging someone in this type of fraud to actually getting a conviction. And so are we supposed to wait around for the next 2 years? That's 8 meetings a year, 16 meetings. She's supposed to lower interest rates, not raise interest rates, conduct monetary policy while she's been accused of this fraud. It's not President Trump's fault that she's a deceitful miscreant. She has to accept responsibility and do the right thing here, and that is let this process play out in the courts. And ultimately, she may have to hire a defense attorney. Forget being a plaintiff challenging the president. She's going to have to hire a defense attorney if the DOJ ends up prosecuting this.
Well, at the very least, she should come out with any evidence she may have that would go against the evidence that we have actually seen, which indicates she was saying essentially she was a resident in 2 different places at the same time, 2 different places in 2 different states, by the way. So we'll see how that plays out. Steve, the economic events that may happen if she does leave would mean that the president would have a majority stake in the voting population of the governors of the Fed, correct?
Yeah, something like that. Now, look, I still believe, David, that almost all of the power at the Federal Reserve Board really resides with the chairman. And so who it is going to be that's the chairman is really the critical thing. This raises the question, because this probably will be challenged in the courts, and it raises the question of whether the president has the authority to remove someone, whether it's a Federal Reserve Board governor or the chairman himself, from the Federal Reserve Board. I believe the president should have that authority. I'm not a lawyer, but my point is if people on the Federal Reserve Board aren't accountable to the president, then who are they accountable to? Nobody elected these people. So I think, but look, the Federal Reserve chairman is the one who's going to make the decision about interest rates. I think the case is pretty strong now that those rates have to come down if we're going to have a very healthy economy in 2026.
James, isn't Powell more of a lame duck than ever, though, right now?
Yeah, I think Steve is right, David, that the chair really does run the Federal Reserve. You know that because at the July meeting, there were 2 dissents. And that just sounds okay, whatever, there were 2 dissents. That was the most dissenting votes we had gotten since 1993. That is just the latest piece of evidence, right, David? That this is not an organization where everyone gets a vote and then at the end of the day, we tally them up. But Chair Powell is on his way out. And the facts show that rates should be a lot lower. Steve is right.
Steve. What were you going to say?
Just one quick thing on the way out. I think James is right, but I don't think there's ever been a time where the chairman has lost a vote. I may be wrong about that, but in other words, when the chairman says we're going to do X, there may be some dissents, but I don't think there's ever been a time where there's been a revolt on the Board of Governors.
Steve, I just want to switch to another topic for a second here. The Trump's ultimatum to the bureaucrats who have been targeting U.S. tech companies in terms of taxation and regulations, et cetera, while, by the way, we should mention, giving essentially a free ride to China's tech companies so they don't apply the same pressure to China that they're doing to the United States. The president is now saying he's going to turn on the tariffs again on Europe if they don't lay off of this kind of attack. What do you make of that?
These are totally discriminatory taxes. The only reason that Europe has these taxes is they're nowhere in the tech sphere, whereas the United States totally dominates, whether it's Apple or Amazon or Nvidia, all of these companies, Meta, and their only response to American dominance is try to impose these discriminatory taxes. Donald Trump, congratulations to Donald Trump for standing up for American companies. That's what he's doing.
Yeah. James, I got another one for you, which is a little different. You had an old suggestion back when Doge was in its heyday of giving a $5,000 check, a bonus, a Doge bonus to Americans. 79 million, I think, was the number that you were thinking of. Of course, Doge didn't get everything it should have gotten, a lot of people think, from Congress because, you know, there are a bunch of weak-kneed folks there. But what about a tariff dividend? We now have as much as $300 billion coming in from tariffs that we didn't expect to get. That would come out to about $1,900 per taxpayer, 158 million taxpayers. What about giving quarterly bonuses, tariff bonuses, to American taxpayers from that tariff revenue?
Well, it's an intriguing idea, David, and I'm happy that the president echoed support for it. But I think at the end of the day, what the president has done with the tariff policy is just extraordinary. We heard from Secretary Bessent today in the cabinet meeting. We are pushing on $500 billion that we are looking at from this, and then close to $4 trillion over the next decade. And then the CBO, of course, threw in the towel, admitting they were wrong and they should have included the tariff revenue in the first place. Let me go to Steve's point for just a second on Europe. If Europe wants to tax and regulate their companies to death, they can. But don't you dare come for our companies in America and try to destroy them.
They're targeting U.S.
Right. And look, there's a reason why, David, we have Nvidia, Microsoft, OpenAI, Google, Apple, etc. And then Europe has, well, let's see. They have Spotify. That's all they got over there. We have real companies, and President Trump is standing up for us.
One more. I'm going to try to squeeze in. They're going to kill me in the control room. But one more, Steve. You mentioned the possibility of a sovereign wealth fund. That is the stake that we're taking, that President's taking in Intel and with the Nippon Steel deal, et cetera. Could that blossom into a sovereign wealth fund, which you quote Barron's today? There's a guy, Bill Albert, in Barron's wrote, "This is a rotten idea on all fronts. Politicians and unelected bureaucrats are going to play investment banker? ? There's some incompetents who just invested tens of billions in California train to nowhere, built tens of thousands of windmills that barely produce electricity." He goes on. The government is a terrible investor because political influences don't make economic sense. Can't you talk President Trump out of this?
I wish I could. I would just simply say that, if the government is going to get into the game of picking industrial winners and losers, every time they've done it, guess what, David? They pick the losers.
Yeah, that's right. It's hard to argue with it. We got to leave it at that, guys. Great stuff. Steve Moore, James Fishback, pleasure to see you both.
Welcome back. Federal Reserve Chairman Jay Powell giving his final Jackson Hole speech on Friday, signaling he is shifting policy and open to cutting rates next month. Powell said that the labor market is, quote, in a curious balance and risks are rising. Joining me now is White House Senior Counsel for Trade and Manufacturing, Peter Navarro. Peter, it's great to see you this morning. Welcome. And I know you have an op-ed out on Jay Powell, which is going to be coming out later on in the week. Give us your assessment of the chairman's speech and this new thinking for September's cut.
Maria, great. Thanks for asking. Look, it was 20 minutes of Powell gobbledygook and 30 seconds of pure Trump beauty. Powell finally acknowledged what we've been saying in the Trump camp all along, that tariffs don't create inflation. He had two sentences that said, one, they don't. Even if they might create some inflation, it's only a one-shot deal, so there's no inflationary spiral. And two, in the second sentence, he said that's not going to stop him from cutting rates. The markets, off they went, Maria. I'm on record as saying Dow's hitting 50,000. I said that, Maria, by the way, when we were at the plunge, the drop, when Donald Trump first introduced the tariffs this term, and the markets rebounded, and it's going to be a rocket ship because we're going to have price stability and economic growth from the various aspects of Trump policy. It's the deregulation, the tax cuts, the strategic energy dominance, and guess what? Fair trade, which is getting us tariffs. They're going to pay down our debt, pay down our debt, pay down our debt, and pay for the big, beautiful tax bill.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of things to like here, right? I mean, whether it be all that money coming in from tariff revenue or deregulation and President Trump's focus on growth. I mean, this is all about growth. So I got to get your take on this latest move, which is causing some debate, and that is the government taking a 10% stake in Intel. Now, nearly $9 billion in grants awarded to the company by the 2022 CHIPS Act will be converted to equity. President Trump wrote on Truth Social, the U.S. paid nothing for these shares, and now the shares are valued at approximately $11 billion. This is a great deal for America, he wrote, and also a great deal for Intel, building leading-edge semiconductor chips, which is what Intel does, fundamental to the future of our nation. Peter, do you see that you're a free market capitalist, and I know that free market capitalists usually don't like government invested in companies, but is this a different situation because it's such an important product? Semiconductor chips, 90% of the advanced semis made in Taiwan?
This is a hugely different situation. If we didn't have Biden's massive CHIP Acts, which is just a giveaway. I mean, the amount of money that is going to wealthy companies in that space is obscene. If he hadn't done that, we wouldn't be able to take that 10% check. But if the government's going to give them a bunch of free money, hey, we're going to get something back for the people of America. That's the thinking. It's the thinking of President Trump. It's the thinking of Howard Lutnick at the Commerce Department. And it just makes sense for the American people. So put away all that talk about state capitalism, this, that, and the other thing. Biden was the problem when he passed that CHIPS Act and just gave free money away. We're taking some of that money back and getting folks here. I mean, if we had, look, if you look at the strategy of Donald Trump, he would have used the same strategy he's using for other strategic sectors, which is tariffs, which bring in billions, in Chip's case, probably trillions of dollars of new investment. And that's the way we would have did it. But hey, we inherited the Biden giveaway. We're going to take advantage of that for the American people.
I think you are spot on that. I mean, that is a great assessment of what is going on. So thank you for that. But of course, President Trump wants the supply chains to return to America. This is one of his priorities. He does not want to be relying on Taiwan for advanced semiconductor chips, 90% of them made in Taiwan.
Yes.
He does not want to be relying on China for prescription drugs and the underlying components that we need made in China. So what do you make of this new tariff investigation on furniture imports, Peter? The president said it is a step toward bringing manufacturing back to the United States. He wrote on Truth Social, furniture coming from other countries into the U.S. will be tariffed at a rate yet to be determined. What do you think that is? And tell us what we should know about this situation.
See, this is a beautiful thing. I don't know if you know this, Maria, but when I was getting my PhD in economics at Harvard, I actually helped work my way through by managing a furniture store. And every year I'd go up to High Point in North Carolina and buy a bunch of stuff for the store and stuff like that. And what I saw after China joined the World Trade Organization was a total devastation of our furniture industry, our cabinetry, kitchen cabinetry, and all of that by the same usual playbook of the Chinese communists, which is to dump into markets and use all the government subsidies. And it really, I mean, North Carolina in particular, I mean, it ripped the heart. I mean, between textiles and furniture in North Carolina, China ripped the heart out of that state. But there's a lot of other places in America that are fine furniture producers, kitchen cabinetry. Another game that goes on is like you slap a tariff on China, and the next thing you know, they're setting up shop in Vietnam, transshipping to here. President Trump's cracking down on all of that, and he's going to do it for the craftsmen and workers of the American people. And that's a good thing, Maria, and it couldn't happen sooner.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, when you've got the dumping going on and putting American companies at a disadvantage, President Trump's going to move on it, and he knows it. I mean, look, I want to get your take on India, because the foreign minister has revealed that the trade negotiations with Washington are ongoing. Now, India keeps buying Russian oil. There are lines that New Delhi needs to defend, he claims. Indian goods facing an additional U.S. tariff of up to 50%. That will take effect this week. Some of the highest levies imposed by Washington, largely because of the increased purchases of Russian oil. Is that what this is about, Peter? What is your take on India, and why is it that India is supporting Russia in this way?
Well, first of all, Russia invaded Ukraine February 2022. Before that, India bought virtually no oil at all from Russia. After that, it's buying a ton of oil because the refiners in Russia have partnered with the refiners in India to do this scam. It's basically the Indians get discounted crude, and then they refine it and they sell it on world markets to Europe, Asia, and Africa. And then Russia uses that money to build more weapons to bomb Ukraine and kill people. And then the Europeans and the American taxpayers have to pony up more money to pay to protect Ukraine. That's insanity. That's absolute insanity. So no one should feel sorry for India when the United States wants them to stop buying Russia oil, when it's not to cool their homes or to drive their cars. It's just to make profits for big oil in India. And by the way, your interview with Christine Lagarde was beautiful, but when you mentioned earlier this Europe's still buying Russian oil.
Yeah.
That's insanity, too.
Yeah, it's true. And that's what President Trump is aware of and wants it to stop funding the war against Ukraine. Peter, it's always a pleasure. Great set of topics there. Thanks for being here.
Take care, Maria.
Peter Navarro joining us. That's Vice President J.D. Vance defending the federal government's investigation into former National Security Advisor John Bolton, pushing back against Democrats who are calling the raid on Bolton's home retribution. The FBI conducting a surprise raid on Friday on Bolton's Maryland home over claims that he sent highly sensitive classified documents from a private email server to his family during the first Trump administration. Bolton has not been charged with any crimes. Joining me now is Arkansas Congressman Rick Crawford. He is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Mr. Chairman, great to see you this morning. Thanks so much for being here. Your reaction to what took place on Friday?
Yeah, I think the vice president summed it up pretty well. Look, I think if the FBI under Director Patel and the DOJ under AG Bondi feel like it's necessary to serve a warrant, probable cause indicates that they need to serve a warrant, then that's fairly standard. I don't think Democrats should be throwing a fit over this, particularly given the nature of the raid on Mar-a-Lago. This is relatively mild by comparison. And so I don't understand the outrage over this particular incident. And this will be fully adjudicated. This is very transparent. Everybody's aware of what's going on here. It's not like this is some sort of a secret plot to try to take somebody down. It just seems to be a double standard here.
Well, I mean, there is a double standard. And by the way, there's outrage on the other side as well. I've got some outrage over the 10 years of attacks on President Trump and the lies from Russia collusion to indictments to impeachments and all the rest, trying to smear the president's name for so many years. Are we ever going to see any accountability for that, in your view?
Yeah, in fact, our committee has taken some pretty bold steps to ensure that happens. DNI Gabbard has you've seen what she's done over the last couple of weeks, where she's basically pulling back the curtain saying, here's what happened. There will be accountability. There's a whole lot of folks at the very top of the heap, from President Obama to former FBI Director Comey to former CIA Director Brennan, former DNI Clapper, and a whole host of senior executives in those related agencies that have a lot of explaining to do, and DNI Gabbard is leading the transparency effort.
Well, I mean, look, you're the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, and there was a time that Adam Schiff was the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. And while he was the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, he went on all these TV shows, and he said that Trump colluded with Russia, and that there was Trump-Russia collusion in plain sight. Now, as chairman of the Intelligence Committee, wouldn't he have known better?
Well, he should have, and in fact, he did. And so he basically conjured up a whole lot of speculation. Yes, he did lie. He's a serial liar and a serial leaker. He should have never been chairman of that committee, never been on the committee as far as I'm concerned. But I was on the committee the entire time that he was chair and ranking member, and he had no business being on that committee, and there's more to come on that.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, look, the Durham report indicated a whole lot of information there that, that we knew of. But, look, we can't jump out there and say things that are classified. Right. In contrast, Chairman Schiff, ranking member Schiff, would leave proceedings in the Intel Committee from a SCIF, a Secure Compartmented Information Facility, and walk out to a media spray and immediately leak information in real time, and then walk back into the proceeding.
That's right. And I remember that. I lived it because I was watching what he was doing. And I thought to myself, he's the chairman or the ranking member of this committee. He has seen information that we have not. So for him to go on all these shows and say that collusion is in plain sight when he knew he had no evidence of it being the chairman. That's why I posed the question to you. You're the chairman. You know what you have. You know what you've seen much more than we have. So to use your title to have this authority to say something about a sitting president, I mean, is there any accountability for that?
Well, there will be. We're going to allow the FBI and Department of Justice to do what they do, and it's not in the lane of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. We can make criminal referrals, but we don't prosecute. We aggressively oversee the agencies, and where there is misconduct or any indication of something that needs a referral, we're happy to make that referral. But that is in the lane of DOJ and the FBI.
Of course, of course. Mr. Chairman, the DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, also announced a major transformation of the agency. She's calling it ODNI 2.0, aiming to cut more than its size by more than 40%. That would save $700 million a year. Your reaction to that?
Well, I support that. In fact, we'll probably codify that in the upcoming Intelligence Authorization Act that we will be marking up next month. But I think she's on the right track. The ODNI has ballooned into a huge agency that really exceeds what it was stood up to do some 20 years ago. She's recognized that and wants to get back into the primary function it's supposed to serve, as opposed to, this great bureaucratic bloat that has taken place over the last 20 years.
Congressman, before you go, you're about to come back to Washington in about 2 weeks or so, week and a half. What will your priorities be at that point?
Well, as I mentioned, we have the Intelligence Authorization Act on our plate. We will probably the second week in September, we'll undertake that. A lot of reforms. One of them you just talked about. There are a few other things that we have in the hopper to help streamline the intelligence community, as well as reform the intelligence community. So we're doing everything we can to support the principles of the various agencies to achieve that reform.
Congressman, it's great to see you this morning. We look forward to talking
Yes,
more.
ma'am. Thank you.
We're watching your work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rick Crawford joining us.
This is our hot topic of the hour. It's something I just mentioned to you at the top of the show. President Trump says that Fed Governor Lisa Cook has been relieved of her position on the Fed board over rising allegations of mortgage fraud. He posted the letter that he sent her on Truth Social outlining her firing, saying, quote, "The American people must be able to have full confidence in the honesty of the members overseeing the Federal Reserve. In light of your deceitful and potentially criminal conduct in a financial matter, they cannot, and I do not have such confidence in your integrity." Now, Cook refusing to resign, reportedly saying this: President Trump reported to fire me for cause when no cause exists under the law, and he has no authority to do so. I will not resign. I will continue to carry out my duties to help the American economy, as I have been doing since 2022. U.S. Federal Housing Director Bill Pulte, who has been on this case since day one, thanking the president for his actions. He said on X, "If you commit mortgage fraud in America, we will come after you, no matter who you are." Pulte also spoke with Maria last week on this program, who laid out Cook's situation.
Lisa Cook has big problems. They're going to continue to get bigger. It's very odd to see people try to twist backways, sideways, and upside down to justify mortgage fraud. This is a very serious crime. I believe the president has ample cause to fire Lisa Cook. We will go where mortgage fraud is. If mortgage fraud is with a Republican or a Democrat, it doesn't matter. If you commit mortgage fraud in President Trump's America, we're going to come after you. And Lisa Cook is no exception to that. In her case, she had a home in Michigan, and then 2 weeks later, she gets a loan in Michigan for her home. She declares it as her primary principal residence, and then literally 2 weeks later, she goes to an Atlanta condo, buys an Atlanta condo, secures a loan, and also declares that as her primary residence.
Okay, so to be here clear, Mitch, so the allegations of mortgage fraud, Bill Pulte has referred this to the DOJ and Pam Bondi. So Cook is under investigation. However, there is no decision there, and charges have not been filed. The question now becomes the legal term under the law that governs the Federal Reserve, and that is where it's a little murky. This is unprecedented. We've never had a president, quote, fire a Federal Reserve Board governor in our nation's history. What do you make of this?
Well, there's a presumption of innocence out there, in general. That's the way our country was founded. Having said that, she is a governor of the Federal Reserve Bank. The Federal Reserve Bank, amongst other things, is responsible for oversight of our entire financial system. And here you have an individual who said that Michigan and Atlanta, Georgia, are both her principal residents. It could be a clerical oversight, give her the benefit of the doubt, but it doesn't look good. It doesn't smell good. And this is part of a pattern. We saw this with Senator Adam Schiff, and there are others, that, you know, people who are in a position of authority, like senators, like Fed governors, should not be making these kinds of mistakes. It's not a good look. But if it wasn't for the president's harsh criticism of the Fed and Jerome Powell and their decision-making prowess regarding interest rates and other things, this probably wouldn't be as hot of a political issue.
Well, Michael, so Trump cited Article 2 of the Constitution and the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 to say that she had been fired effective immediately. Now, she's hired Abby Lowell, and they are working on her behalf. And the firm says they are planning to take whatever actions are needed to prevent this attempted illegal action by President Trump. Look, I mean, under the Federal Reserve Act, the president can fire again, and I said this twice now, for cause. The question is the legality of this, and we've never been here legally before. And so, if you look at quotes by some of the legal scholars that are out there, Columbia's Catherine Judge, Fed scholar Peter Conti Brown, no clean precedent for this. It's typically an on-the-job type of misconduct. So I'm kind of jumping ahead to the legal fight that it looks like this is about to begin or has begun as of last night.
You got to wonder what's going through her head. Like, where does this go? You know, and how effective can she be? And when the president of the United States sits there and says, "We don't need you anymore. Don't participate in this," and there's a legal battle coming up. We know it's going to happen, but in her current position, she's got no future here. You know, let's say they say, "Oh, it really wasn't there." No, she'll be tainted with this, and it really is, as you said, Mitch. This is. You have to be holier than thou if you're in these types of authoritative positions. Because otherwise, the person who's applying for mortgages, they may not have confidence and faith in the system itself if you don't really regulate it this way. So now it's Trump saying, nope, we're going to draw the line right now. No more mortgage fraud, and we're going to go after you. Okay, it's got to begin from the top.
Well, and also, too, Mitch, you know, the overall makeup of the board right now, just to be clear, she's only 2 years into a 14-year term. So obviously she's going to fight this, and she's hired Abby Lowell. On the other side of this is the fact that if she does go, that gives the president another opportunity to appoint another Fed governor that might be more willing to have an open ear to the fact that interest rates likely need to be lower. Let's be clear here. The market's expecting a cut in September. Fair enough. At the same time, though, you know, this would give him another opportunity to make sure. The question is the Fed's independence. And I think that's where you're going to get a lot of spirited discussion today about that.
What's interesting is the Fed's independence is a cornerstone of our financial system. However, the president does have the opportunity to appoint governors to the Fed. So the question is, if he can appoint, can he remove? And that's what will be flushed out in the court. But, you know, the fact that you have such a potentially heinous crime here, and I'm using the word crime carefully.
And these are alleged
crimes.
This is all alleged, and that's why there's an investigation underway.
Correct.
She has not been charged with anything.
But it has to do with a mortgage. Right. And you don't have to look too far in the rearview mirror to remember how mortgage problems and fraud took down not just our financial system, but the global financial system. Again, it's a terrible look. I agree with you, Michael. This is going to be something that taints her. But I think the president's feud is with Powell, and it's expanding.